I'm Cesar Delgado from Back Roads of Illinois podcast. Welcome to the show with us for today with Mike Castle from Stone X in Kansas City, Missouri. Mike is a
Great to be with you today,
fertilizer
Caesar.
specialist for Stone X in Kansas City, Missouri.
Today, Caesar.
Welcome to the show with us for today, Michael. My pleasure to have you. Let's start to talk about fertilizer prices on these world events. Could you tell to our listeners about this topic?
Of course, if we start with the urea market, we've seen prices fall fairly hard since India's last tender, with the big question in the market now being where does the next round of demand come from? Typically, this time of year, Brazil would be importing pretty heavily ahead of their upcoming safrinha corn plantings, but dry weather down there could push back planting windows and potentially reduce acreage and thus their overall urea demand. We know that Europe and North America have some needs ahead of the spring as well, but here in their off season, the market remains very, very quiet. And in general, fertilizer markets do not handle quiet times very well. So we've seen prices slide here through the fall.
What is the forecast for the fertilizer prices for next growing season for the farmers?
Yeah. Since I'm not a broker, I'm not allowed to forecast specific prices, but speaking directionally, I'd say in general, we're closer to the floor than the ceiling today. We saw a perk up in the urea market on Friday and have kind of seen some follow through this morning as well, which is potentially a sign of buyers finding some interest after breaking below that $300 a ton NOLA level, which could mean we're kind of hovering around our bottom here for the time being. UAN's been extremely stagnant after falling this summer, but the recent weakness in urea prices could weigh on values. We did see a UAN barge trade here last Friday, a bit cheaper than we had previously, kind of breaking a streak of just being flat for a couple months. But as we get closer to spring applications, we should see that uptick in demand provide a boost to values, which would also help pull UAN and the rest of the nitrogen complex upwards, especially with how tight we ended last year across the board on our domestic balance sheets. On the phosphate side, values kind of look to remain stubbornly supported here as long as Chinese export restrictions remain in place and domestic production remains below normal, just kind of leading to tighter supply than we would think at this point with decent imports to start the fertilizer year. But the potential for reduced duties on Moroccan imports in Mosaic CBD case could help bring a boost to supply. Unfortunately, that situation remains pretty uncertain for today.
Very good. That is pretty expensive for fertilizer after 6 years.
Oh, yeah.
Mike, the Mississippi River is being lower than previously years for right now alongside in Illinois and Iowa, Wisconsin. What do you recommend for locking the fertilizer prices?
Yeah, the ongoing low water issues that we've seen have been mostly along the lower Mississippi River over these last few months. It's affected shipments throughout the system, but thankfully the upper Mississippi's been in pretty good shape. I definitely think having the conversation with your supplier earlier than normal would be a good move this year in order to ensure your fertilizer is there when you need it in the spring in case we do see logistical constraints if water levels down there stay low, especially if we continue to see the shift to more last minute buying like we saw last year, where we ended up seeing some folks struggle with availability come spring with so much demand showing up at the same time.
Finally, what is your opinion on the fertilizer prices for next couple weeks for right now?
The near term looks to remain pretty depressed. Like I said, it's a very quiet period of global demand. We know that there are buyers out there that need to step forward, and when one does, we should see others step in and compete at the same time. But for right now, with the market remaining quiet, we're definitely looking at some great buying opportunities with prices being down here, especially when you look at them compared to current grain values and compare that ratio to the last couple of years here, where we've seen very expensive prices. However, once we do see that demand from elsewhere around the world. We'll see India return likely in January. Brazil, we know, is going to have to import ahead of their safrinha plantings, just the timing of that in question. We know Europe's going to have needs before spring, and obviously we do as well. So once that demand kind of starts stepping forward here early in 2024, we should see a rebound. So again, definitely a good time to be starting those conversations about your spring needs if you haven't already.
Is there anything would you like to go to tell our listeners about this issue of the shipping cost of fertilizer in the Mississippi River?
Yes, these low water levels can lead to draft reductions that make the cost per ton more expensive, with barges not being able to load as heavy. Also, closures for dredging, other delays can reduce the overall barge availability and move freight rates higher as companies compete for more limited shipments.
My pleasure that you joined the show for today. Thanks, Michael.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Caesar. All the best to you and to your listeners.
This is Mike Castle from Stone X in Kansas City, Missouri for today's program. From back roads of Illinois, I am Caesar Delgado. Have a good day.